Masoud Pezeshkian's biggest political rivals within the Iranian regime are the hardline principlist factions who currently dominate key unelected and elected institutions. While Pezeshkian himself has adopted a conciliatory tone and even called himself a reformist principlist to navigate this landscape, these hardliners represent a significant challenge to his policy goals. The ultra-conservatives of the Paydari Party are the most radical and ideologically rigid hardline faction. They are staunchly opposed to any nuclear agreement with world powers, diplomatic engagement with the West, Iran's accession to the FATF anti-money laundering conventions, lifting of internet restrictions and censorship, and leniency in hijab enforcement. They also have close ties to the IRGC. They attempted to derail Pezeshkian's goals in a variety of ways. For instance, they hold significant numbers in the current conservative-dominated Majlis. They can initiate impeachment proceedings against his ministers, as has already happened with some of his cabinet members. They can also block legislation and use their oversight powers to create political headaches. Hardline media outlets like Kayhan, Tasnim News Agency, Javan, Vatane Emruz, and others are powerful tools for propaganda and actively scrutinize and criticize Pezeshkian's every move, often distorting his statements and painting him as soft on the West or disloyal to revolutionary principles. Paydari members and media outlets constantly invoke revolutionary values and principles to pressure Pezeshkian to conform to their agenda, especially on social and cultural issues and foreign policy vis-à-vis Israel and the United States. They also mobilize their base and aligned organizations to protest or put public pressure on the government if they perceive any significant deviation from hardline norms. Their influence within institutions like the Guardian Council and the judiciary are used to block policies and enforce stricter interpretations of laws that contradict Pezeshkian's agenda, for example, on social reforms. The traditional, pragmatic conservatives, for example, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf's faction, while still conservative, are more pragmatic than the ultra-conservatives, focusing more on economic stability and less on ideological purity at all costs. That being said, they also attempt to derail some of Pezeshkian's goals. They might not oppose every single one of Pezeshkian's goals, especially if they see economic benefit, but they will strategically obstruct any policies that challenge their own power bases, economic interests, and ideological red lines. Their combined numbers with the ultra-conservatives give them control over the legislative process. They use this power to demand concessions, dilute legislation, and simply refuse to pass bills that don't align with their vision. They generally prefer maintaining the existing power structures of the status quo and are wary of any changes that could upset the balance, particularly if they empower reformist elements too much. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, has vast economic empire and a security apparatus which gives it immense power. With this power, it is able to impede economic reforms and foreign investments when they threaten its vested interests. The IRGC is known to conduct and intensify crackdowns on social behavior or dissent, regardless of Pezeshkian's promises of greater social freedoms. As it largely operates independently on regional foreign policy and security matters, it potentially leads to escalations that complicate Pezeshkian's diplomatic efforts. Controlled by hardliners, the judiciary can undermine Pezeshkian's efforts by enforcing social restrictions, like the hijab, with greater severity, even if the president seeks a more lenient approach. Continuing to crack down on activists, journalists, and perceived political opponents runs counter to Pezeshkian's calls for a more inclusive atmosphere. While many reformists support Pezeshkian, some are already expressing disappointment with his early moves, particularly his cabinet appointments, which included many non-reformist figures and a perceived lack of bold action. If Pezeshkian fails to deliver on promises related to social freedoms, economic improvement, or greater political openness, he risks losing the support of the very base that elected him. This could lead to apathy, reduced voter turnout in future elections, and a weakened mandate. Reformist commentators and media can voice their disappointment, which, while not directly derailing in the same way as hardliners, erodes public trust and makes it harder for Pezeshkian to build the broad consensus he seeks. The overarching strategy of Pezeshkian's rivals, particularly the hardliners, is to limit his room for maneuver, exploit crises, weaken his mandate, and protect their respective interests. They often limit his room to maneuver by constantly reminding him of the supreme leader's ultimate authority and the red lines of the revolution. They exploit crises by using any domestic or foreign policy setbacks, economic woes, or social unrest to blame his administration and push for more hardline solutions. They weaken his mandate through parliamentary pressure, media campaigns, and even encouraging public disillusionment when he doesn't deliver on promises that are often beyond his control. They protect their interests by safeguarding their economic holdings and ideological control over various state institutions. Pezeshkian's presidency is therefore a continuous negotiation and power struggle, where his ability to achieve his goals depends on his political acumen, his relationship with the supreme leader, and his capacity to find common ground, or at least avoid open confrontation with powerful hardline factions. When discussing Masoud Pezeshkian's political rivals within the Iranian regime, it's important to understand that Iranian politics is not characterized by formal political parties in the Western sense, but rather by shifting factions and currents. Ultra-conservatives within the Paydari front include Saeed Jalili, Morteza Agha Tehrani, Sadegh Mahsouli, and Mahmoud Nabavian. Saeed Jalili was President Pezeshkian's main rival in the 2024 presidential election runoff. Jalili is a prominent figure of the Paydari Front, known for his uncompromising stance on the nuclear issue. He was former chief nuclear negotiator under Ahmadinejad, and has hardline views on social issues. His strong performance in the first round and substantial votes in the runoff demonstrate the significant support his faction commands. Morteza Agha Tehrani is the current chairman of the parliament's Cultural Committee and a key figure in the Paydari Party. He has been instrumental in pushing controversial hardline bills, including the hijab and chastity law. He also previously served as an ethics advisor to Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Sadegh Mahsouli is the Secretary General of the Paydari Party, a former IRGC officer and a minister in Ahmadinejad's cabinet. While he rarely makes public statements, he is a powerful figure behind the scenes. Mahmoud Nabavian is a prominent Paydari member and ultra-hardliner lawmaker in the current parliament. He secured the top spot in Tehran's parliamentary elections, highlighting Paydari's strength. Pragmatic conservatives are often associated with Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. While potentially more willing to engage in practical governance, this faction still holds conservative views and can act as a rival if Pezeshkian's policies clash with their interests or power. Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf is the current Speaker of the Parliament. A former IRGC commander, police chief, and Tehran mayor, Ghalibaf is a seasoned politician who represents a more pragmatic conservative wing. While he competed against Pezeshkian in the presidential election, he also holds significant institutional power as Speaker, and his faction's cooperation is essential for passing legislation. He is known to have a strong relationship with the IRGC and to have a close personal and familial relationship with Ayatollah Khamenei. Key hardline figures within unelected institutions can also directly obstruct Pezeshkian's policies. Gholam Hossein Mohsen Ejai is the current Chief Justice of Iran. He is a long-standing hardline cleric with a history in the intelligence and judicial systems, and has been sanctioned internationally for human rights abuses. The judiciary's strict enforcement of laws, particularly on social issues, and its role in suppressing dissent can directly undermine Pezeshkian's reformist promises. Ahmad Jannati is the chairman of the Guardian Council. At over 90 years old, he is a deeply entrenched hardline cleric. The Guardian Council's power to vet all candidates for elections and veto parliamentary legislation makes Jannati a pivotal figure in upholding the conservative establishment's control and limiting any significant policy shifts. Hossein Salami is the commander-in-chief of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. As the head of Iran's most powerful military, security, and economic organization, Salami represents the institutional power of the IRGC. Its influence over the economy, internal security, and regional foreign policy means that Pezeshkian's agenda will need to align with, or at least not fundamentally challenge, the IRGC's interests and ideological lines. Gholam Hadi Haddadadel is a senior conservative figure, former parliament speaker, and currently a member of the Expediency Discernment Council. He is a prominent principlist ideologue and close to the Supreme Leader's family. He represents the deep-seated ideological opposition to reformist ideas. These individuals and the factions they represent likely use their institutional power in Parliament, the judiciary, and the Guardian Council, as well as control over state media and ideological influence, to scrutinize, criticize, and potentially block any or all of Pezeshkian's initiatives that they perceive as a threat to their power, the regime's core principles or the interests of the hardline establishment.